I didn't think much of the first note. Just a folded scrap of paper tucked under my windshield wiper, scrawled in red ink, "This isn't your space." I laughed it off. I'd lived here for 6 years. My name was on the deed. But the notes kept coming, taped to my door, slipped into my mailbox, even tucked inside my grocery bags. Always the same message. Always the same ink. Then came the fines. $75 for unauthorized parking. $150 for excessive lawn shade. I didn't even know that was a thing. The HOA president, a woman who'd never once spoken to me, started showing up at my property with a clipboard and a camera. She didn't knock. She didn't speak. She just stood there, documenting. Neighbors stopped waving. My trash bins were moved. My dog's leash went missing. It felt like the whole street had turned against me, and I had no idea why, until I discovered the hidden rule buried deep in the HOA bylaws, and realized I was never supposed to live here at all. But by then it was too late. So I did the one thing they didn't expect, something that would make sure they never forgot me. When I first moved into Sycamore Ridge, I thought I'd found peace. The kind of quiet that hums in the background, bird song at dawn, sprinklers ticking in rhythm, the occasional bark echoing down the cul-de-sac. My house sat at the edge of the neighborhood, backed by a stretch of woods that turned golden in the fall. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. A modest ranch-style home with a wraparound porch and a gate I built myself, sturdy, simple, and just wide enough for my truck. I kept to myself, not out of coldness, just habit. I'd spent years in cities where neighbors were strangers and silence was currency. So when folks waved, I waved back. When the HOA sent their welcome packet, laminated rules, a map, and a list of preferred paint tones, I skimmed it, signed the acknowledgement, and tucked it in a drawer. For a while, life was good. I worked from home, took long walks with my dog, and spent weekends fixing up the place, repainting the porch, replanting the garden, replacing the old mailbox with one shaped like a trout, a small joke, a nod to my fly fishing days. Then came the first knock. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon. A woman in a beige windbreaker stood at my door, clipboard in hand, lips pursed like she'd just bitten into a lemon. She didn't introduce herself, just pointed at my mailbox and said, "That's not regulation." I blinked. "Excuse me." She tapped the clipboard. Page 14. Section 3. Mailboxes must be standard black or white. No novelty shapes. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. That night, I pulled out the HOA packet. Page 14. Section 3. She was right. I hadn't noticed it before, buried between lawn height requirements and acceptable curtain colors. I shrugged it off, painted the mailbox black, moved on. But something shifted after that. Neighbors who used to wave now looked away. The woman in the windbreaker, I later learned her name was Marlene, began walking past my house twice a day, always with that clipboard. She'd pause at the gate, scribble something, then move on. Soon, I got a letter. Violation. Gate width exceeds HOA standard. A $50 fine. I measured it. It was 2 inches wider than the guideline, a guideline, not a rule. I appealed. They denied it. Then came the noise complaints, the unauthorized landscaping, the unapproved porch furniture. Each fine came with a photo, grainy, zoomed-in shots taken from a street. My dog's water bowl, a hanging fern, a chipped paint spot on the porch railing. I started feeling watched. One morning, I found Marlene standing at the edge of my property, staring at my truck. She didn't speak, just wrote something down and walked away. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about control. Sycamore Ridge had a reputation, tight-knit, well-maintained, high standards. But beneath the manicured lawns and pastel shutters was a quiet war. A war of conformity, of power plays disguised as policy. And I had unknowingly stepped into the crosshairs. I wasn't the only one. I'd heard whispers, a retired couple fined for planting sunflowers, a teenager banned from skateboarding on the sidewalk, a family reprimanded for hosting a birthday party, without prior approval. But unlike them, I wasn't going to fold. Because the next violation wasn't just petty, it was personal. And it would push me to do something no one in Sycamore Ridge had ever dared. The next violation came on a Monday morning, a $200 fine for unauthorized vehicle storage. My truck, parked in my own driveway. I stared at the notice, stunned. The photo attached showed my truck from a low angle, like someone had crouched behind a bush to snap it. I checked the HOA packet again. Vehicles had to be garaged or screened from public view. But my driveway wasn't visible from the street unless you stood at a very specific spot, Marlene's favorite spot. I appealed. Again. Denied. That week, I installed a privacy screen along the driveway. Neutral color, HOA approved height. 2 days later, I got another fine, unapproved structure, $175. I called the HOA office. No answer. I emailed. No reply. I drove to the office, a converted garage behind Marlene's house, and found the door locked. A sign read, "Appointments only." So I made one. Marlene greeted me with a tight smile and a stack of papers. "Everything's in the bylaws," she said, without looking up. I asked her to show me where the privacy screen was prohibited. She flipped to a page, pointed at a vague clause. All modifications must be pre-approved. I asked why my neighbors had similar screens. She shrugged. They submitted forms. I hadn't. That was my mistake. But the punishment didn't fit. The next day, my trash bins disappeared. I found them 2 blocks away, behind a hedge. No note. No explanation. Just gone. I replaced them. 2 days later, they vanished again. I installed a camera. The footage showed a figure in a windbreaker dragging them off at 5:12 a.m. I submitted the footage to the HOA. No response. Then came the lawn citation. Excessive shade coverage, $125. My oak tree, the one that had stood there long before the HOA existed, was apparently casting too much shadow on the sidewalk. I trimmed it. Got fined again. Improper pruning. I started keeping a log. Dates, times, photos, fines. I built a folder. A thick one. And as I flipped through it one night, I noticed something strange. Every citation was signed by Marlene. Not the board. Not a committee. Just her. I dug deeper. The HOA board, according to the packet, had 5 members. But only Marlene's name appeared on correspondence. I asked around. Neighbors were vague. Some didn't know who the other members were. One whispered, "There aren't any. She runs everything." I found the HOA's incorporation documents online. Filed 10 years ago. 5 names listed. 4 had moved away. 1 had passed. No updates. No elections. No transparency. Marlene was the HOA, and she had turned Sycamore Ridge into her personal kingdom. I wasn't the only target. I started talking to neighbors, quietly, cautiously. One had been fined for excessive wind chimes. Another for non-conforming patio furniture. A woman down the street had received a warning for unauthorized garden gnome placement. It was absurd, petty, but effective. People complied. They were afraid. I wasn't. I filed a formal complaint with the county. They said HOA disputes were civil matters. I'd need a lawyer. I couldn't afford one. So I kept documenting. I built a case. I started attending HOA meetings, if you could call them that. They were held in Marlene's garage once a month, with no agenda and no minutes. Just her reading citations aloud like a judge. At one meeting, I asked about the mailbox rule. She ignored me. I asked about the gate width. She told me to sit down. I asked who else was on the board. She ended the meeting. That night, I found a new note on my windshield. "You're not welcome here." I installed more cameras. 1 on the porch. 1 by the gate. one facing the street. I caught her again, walking past at dawn, scribbling in her notebook, pausing to glare at my truck. Then came the letter. Final warning. Continued violations may result in legal action, property liens, or forced compliance. I felt my stomach drop. A lien? Over a mailbox? A gate? A privacy screen? I called a lawyer. He confirmed it was possible. HOAs had power. If I didn't fight back, I could lose my home. So I did something bold. I printed every citation, every photo, every email, and every video still. I created a binder. I added a timeline. I wrote a summary. Then I mailed it to every homeowner in Sycamore Ridge, anonymously. 3 days later, the neighborhood was buzzing. People started talking, comparing notes, realizing they weren't alone. A retired teacher discovered she'd been fined for unauthorized bird feeders. A young couple had been warned about excessive laughter during evening hours. It was madness, and it was all Marlene. The next HOA meeting was packed. 20 people crammed into her garage. She looked rattled, tried to maintain control. But questions flew. Who approved the fines? Where were the board members? Why hadn't elections been held? She deflected, dodged, then adjourned the meeting early. But the damage was done. That night, I got a new letter, hand-delivered. No envelope, just a single sheet of paper. You've made a mistake. I don't forget. I stared at it for a long time. Then I smiled. Because I had made a mistake, I'd underestimated her. But now I was ready. And the trap I was setting wasn't just for her. It was for the entire system. It started with a knock, not on my door, but on my gate. 3 sharp reps. No clipboard this time. No windbreaker. Just Marlene, standing in the morning sun, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. Behind her, 2 men in suits. One held a folder. The other wore a badge. Mr. Callahan, the suited man said, "We're here regarding a lien placed on your property by the Sycamore Ridge HOA." I felt the blood drain from my face. "A lien?" I asked. "For what?" "Accumulated fines," he replied, totaling $3,475. Failure to comply with HOA regulations. The board has initiated proceedings to seize assets. I turned to Marlene. She didn't flinch, just stared, cold and silent. I invited them in. We sat at my kitchen table. I pulled out my binder, the one I'd built over months. Every citation, every photo, every email, every video still. I laid it out like evidence in a courtroom. The man with the badge flipped through it. His expression shifted, from neutral to confused to concerned. "This is extensive," he said. I nodded. And every single fine was issued by her. No board votes. No hearings. No due process. He looked at Marlene. "Is that true?" She didn't answer. I opened my laptop, played the footage, Marlene dragging my trash bins, photographing my porch, slipping notes into my mailbox at dawn. The room fell silent. Then I dropped the bombshell. "I filed a petition with the county clerk last week," I said, "to audit the HOA's legal standing. Turns out, the board hasn't held a legitimate election in over 8 years. 3 members moved away. 1 passed. No replacements. No filings. No transparency." The man with the folder shifted in his seat. "That means," I continued, "every fine, every lien, every threat is legally void." Marlene's face twitched. I wasn't done. "I also filed a motion to dissolve the HOA," I said, "with signatures from over 60% of the neighborhood. The county will review it next month." The man with the badge leaned back. "If that's true, this lien is unenforceable, and Ms. Marlene may be liable for fraud." She stood abruptly. "This is slander," she snapped. "You don't understand how this community works." I stood too. "No, Marlene, you don't understand. This isn't your kingdom. It's our neighborhood." She stormed out. But the damage was done. Word spread fast. Neighbors gathered on my lawn that evening. Some angry, some relieved, all curious. I showed them the binder, the footage, the documents. One by one, they nodded, signed the petition, shared their own stories. A retired veteran fined for flying a flag. A mother warned for sidewalk chalk. A teenager banned from playing guitar on the porch. It was bigger than me. It was a reckoning. The next morning, Marlene's garage, the so-called HOA office, was empty. The sign was gone. The mailbox removed. Her clipboard discarded in the trash. But the final twist came 2 days later. A letter. Certified. From the county. Notice of investigation. Alleged misuse of HOA funds. Attached was a summary. Thousands in unexplained expenses. Personal purchases. Travel reimbursements. Unauthorized withdrawals. Marlene wasn't just petty. She was embezzling. And now, the system she built to control us was turning against her. I stood at my gate, binder in hand, watching the neighborhood come alive, not with fear, but with fire. And I knew, the real trap wasn't the cameras, the paperwork, or the confrontation. It was truth, and she walked right into it. The morning after the county's investigation letter arrived, Sycamore Ridge felt different. The air was lighter. The silence, once thick with tension, now buzzed with quiet rebellion. Neighbors who used to avoid eye contact now lingered on their porches. Conversations bloomed. Laughter returned. And for the first time in years, the community felt like a community. Marlene didn't show her face that day, or the next. Her garage remained closed. Her clipboard, once a symbol of control, lay discarded in the trash bin behind her house, warped by rain, ink bleeding into the cardboard. But the real shift came 2 weeks later. A county official arrived with a team. They posted notices on the HOA board, formal declarations of audit, suspension of authority, and pending legal review. The HOA's bank accounts were frozen. All fines were nullified. And every homeowner received a letter. You are no longer obligated to pay any outstanding HOA penalties until further notice. It was vindication. But it wasn't just about the fines. It was about the fear. The quiet fear that had ruled Sycamore Ridge for years. The fear of stepping out of line, of planting the wrong flower, of painting the wrong shade of beige. That fear was gone. And in its place was something stronger, unity. We held a neighborhood meeting, not in Marlene's garage, but on my lawn. Folding chairs, lemonade, a whiteboard borrowed from a local school. People came. They brought stories, ideas, energy. We voted to dissolve the HOA. Unanimously, the paperwork was filed. The county approved it. Sycamore Ridge became one of the few neighborhoods in the region to successfully dismantle its HOA, a feat that made local headlines and sparked conversations in nearby communities. But the impact didn't stop there. A group of us formed a new committee not to enforce rules, but to support each other. We called it the Ridge Collective. No fines, no surveillance, just neighbors helping neighbors. We organized cleanup days, garden swaps, porch concerts. The teenager once banned from playing guitar now performed every Friday evening, his music echoing down the street like a victory anthem. The woman fined for bird feeders? She built a sanctuary. The couple warned about sidewalk chalk? They hosted an art day for kids. The retired veteran? He raised a flag, and we all stood with him. As for Marlene, she was charged with financial misconduct. The investigation revealed years of embezzlement. Thousands siphoned from HOA dues into personal accounts. Travel expenses, luxury purchases, even a spa membership. She pled no contest. Her house went up for sale 6 months later. No one attended the open house. No one waved goodbye. And Sycamore Ridge moved on. But I didn't forget. I kept the binder, the footage, the letters, not out of spite, but as a reminder that silence enables control. That rules without accountability become weapons. That one voice, backed by truth, can unravel an empire built on fear. I still live in the same house. The gate still stands. The mailbox is once again shaped like a trout. And every time I walk my dog past the spot where Marlene used to stand, I smile. Because I didn't just win a fight. I helped reclaim a neighborhood. And if you're watching this, wondering if your HOA, your neighbor, your community is too far gone, remember this. Sometimes, the most powerful trap isn't built with wires or cameras. It's built with courage. And once it's triggered, there's no going back.